Have you ever had that feeling that you're living a life that was kind of designed for you, but not really by you? Well, that exact feeling is right at the heart of Glennon Doyle's memoir, Untamed. This is a story about shedding all those expectations to find the wild, true self that you might not even realize you've been missing. And this line right here, this is the book's rallying cry. It's this powerful idea of reclaiming your instinct over all the conditioning we go through. And for Glennon Doyle, it all kicked off with a trip to the zoo and a cheetah. So let's get into this. The entire book is framed by this one central metaphor, this one story about a cheetah Glennon Doyle saw at a zoo. Her name was Tabitha. Okay, so picture this. They have this event called the Cheetah Run, but it's pure performance. You've got Tabitha, this incredible wild animal, trained to chase a grubby little lure down a perfectly straight path. She doesn't even get to catch it. And her reward? It's not the thrill of a hunt, it's a store-bought steak and some polite clapping from the crowd. So a kid in the crowd asks this perfect, obvious question. But the zookeeper's response is so telling. She just says, "No, Tabitha was born here. She doesn't know any different. She's safer this way." But after the show, Doyle watches Tabitha, and she's just pacing back and forth, relentlessly along the fence, staring out at something far away, like she's remembering a life she's never actually lived. And for Doyle, that restless pacing, man, it felt familiar. In Tabitha, she saw herself. She saw all of us, really, living inside these invisible cages that are built by all of our cultural expectations. And this, she realized, this is what it means to be tamed. And that sets up the book's big conflict, the wild versus the taming. The wild, that's your gut instinct, that inner, authentic self. The taming? Well, that's everything else, the conditioning, the rules, the constant training on how to be good and get everyone's approval. Doyle says this whole taming process really kicks into high gear around age 10. We start getting these invisible cultural memos, little rule books that tell us everything, what feelings are okay, how a woman should behave, who you're allowed to love, what kind of life you're supposed to want. And one by one, these memos just build the bars of our cage. And the price for trying to live inside that cage is just devastating. Doyle is brutally honest about the lengths she went to in order to be golden, the perfect, pleasing woman. This meant rigging a homecoming election and battling bulimia for years, all of it a desperate attempt to shrink herself to fit into a cage that was never, ever meant for her. And the world often reinforces these cages, right? When she was in therapy because her husband had cheated and she was feeling betrayed and furious, the expert advice she got was basically a technique to keep pleasing him. Her own reality, her own pain was just completely dismissed. So being tamed eventually leads to a breaking point, a crisis. And it all centers on this one terrifying question. It's that moment you look around at your whole life, your job, your relationships, your beliefs, and you realize, I don't know how much of this is actually mine. So, how do you get out? How do you break free? For Doyle, the escape started with one single, powerful moment of recognition, and it led her to discover 4 keys to unlocking the door of that cage. She's at a book conference, and she sees soccer legend Abby Wambach across the room, and something inside her just lights up. It wasn't just, love at first sight. Doyle describes it as the voice of her true self, that wild girl she had caged up back when she was 10, finally roaring back to life. This huge awakening leads her to discover 4 keys to unlocking her cages. And these aren't just abstract ideas. They're actual practices for getting back to your wild self. Okay, the first key, feel it all. Instead of numbing out the hard feelings, we have to actually lean into them. The whole idea is that pain isn't the enemy. Avoiding pain is. Pain is the fuel for our evolution. It's the signal that something has to change. The second key is learning to listen to what she calls the knowing. It's that deep, quiet inner wisdom that we all have. The practice here is to sink down beneath all the noise of everyone else's opinions and just listen for your own inner compass, that voice that just knows the next right thing for you. The third key is to use your imagination. This is all about daring to envision a truer, more beautiful life for yourself. And Doyle insists these visions aren't just silly daydreams. They're your soul's blueprints. They're your marching orders for what you need to build next. And finally, the fourth key, and maybe the scariest one, let it burn. This just means accepting that to create that new, imagined life, you have to be willing to let the old one go. You have to let identities, relationships, and beliefs that aren't true anymore just turn to ash. So what happens when you use these keys? What does an untamed life actually look like? It's not about being perfect or reckless or anything like that. It's about being grounded in your own authenticity. Doyle explains this idea of being grounded with a concept from survival training called a touch tree. Basically, a lost person finds a landmark to use as a home base. Well, for an untamed person, that home base, that constant, reliable place you always return to, is your own self. And this, right here, is the ultimate realization of an untamed life. Freedom isn't about finding someone else to complete you or be your home. It's about rooting yourself so deeply in your own being that you become your own source of stability. You become your own home. And this brings us right back around to the beginning. Doyle points out that our first conditioned reaction to a confident, free woman is often suspicion, right? Who does she think she is? But the untamed reaction is recognition. It's celebration. It's seeing another cheetah living in her wildness and feeling inspired instead of threatened. So ultimately, Untamed doesn't just leave us with a bunch of statements. It leaves us with a question for ourselves. It turns the whole journey inward, asking you to become the author of your own life. It's an invitation to stop chasing dirty pink bunnies and finally start imagining your own wild.